The Great Mistake by the Front Yard Gate. One night, after nightcrawler hunting, I came in late, and I bruised my knee rather badly on the front yard gate. I pushed on it, and I pulled on it with all my weight, but the gate wouldn't move. Now, what in the world could make this gate stick? I wondered to myself. And I gave the gate a kick. My foot felt like it had been hit with a brick, and the gate didn't move. I decided to stop a moment and to use my head. The obvious thing is your flashlight, my common sense said, so I quickly turned it on, but the batteries were dead, and the night was very dark. My bruises began throbbing and my patience burned away. So I decided to leave the gate until the following day. If it wanted to be stuck, then that's how it would stay. I'd simply climb the fence. I carefully climbed the fence, but I still entangled my pants, and that made me fall into the flowering forsythia plants. That stupid gate is coming off at the very first chance, I said as I stood up. "Who's that?" said my wife as she lit the floodlight. "Who's making such a racket in the middle of the night?" "It's me," I answered, "and everything's all right. I just battered my knee." "Holy chicken soup," she said. "How did you get so scratched? And look at your pants," she said. "Where will we get them patched?" "My dear," I answered, "I could not get the gate unlatched, so I climbed the fence." "Couldn't unlatch the gate," she said. "Had to climb the fence. I certainly wish you'd take the time to use your common sense. In the future, use your flashlight, and then you might dispense with squashing my flowers." "Look at what I caught," I said, hoping to calm her down. "No, I know what you've got in that pail, and I don't want those worms around." "Oh, come on and look," I said, and then I put the pail down. She made an awful face. Part 2. I was awakened by a noisy bird who chirped on the following day, so I pulled my blankets closer and hoped it would go away. But the bird kept squawking noisily, and I knew that it would stay until I spoke to it. "All right, bird, that's quite enough, and I think you should cut it out," I called from the warmth of my bed, where you know I was not about to peel off my nice warm blankets and go to the window to shout. So the bird still screeched. "Well, I might as well get up," I said, and I gave my wife a hug. Then I swung my feet out of bed and I stood up on the rug. "I hope the next meal you have is a very bitter bug," I shouted to the bird. The bird saw me and squawked twice more, then flew off to join its mate. I watched it go until it was gone, and then I noticed the gate. Someone had leaned over the top of it and had left a heavy crate. So that's why it was stuck. "What's that?" my wife quietly asked while looking over my shoulder. "Whatever it is, it's very heavy," I quietly told her. "How heavy?" she asked. "As heavy as a medium boulder?" That took me by surprise. How much does a boulder weigh? I mean a medium one." "Oh, I don't know," she answered. "I guess about a ton." "Is that about average?" I asked, "as medium boulders run?" She said she thought it was. I looked at the box for a few minutes more and gave myself a shake, for I thought that I must be dreaming, but no, I was awake, and I really had seen something that looked like a furry snake sticking out of the box. "Get out of the way!" my wife called out and took a running dive, then landed under the covers and squealed, "That horrible thing is alive!" "Oh, calm down," I said, "and tell me, why would that crate arrive after dark at our house?" My wife refused to answer me, but hid beneath the sheet. "I think I'll look into this," I said to her wiggling feet. "Goodbye, brave husband," she called after me, "and I hope it doesn't eat meat." That was a pleasant thought. I went downstairs and opened the door as quietly as I could, then looked out to the front yard gate to where the big box stood. I could see that there was printing on it, and that it was made of wood. I also saw breathing holes. "This is very curious," I said, "and I should investigate." So I went straight out and stood straight up by the front yard gate. I stood back a bit and strained my eyes to read the box's weight. It weighed 100 pounds. 100 pounds? 100 pounds? That's less than I had thought. I wondered what was alive in there and where it had been caught. I had never heard of a furry snake. But then I had been taught to keep an open mind. "Good morning, the mailman said brightly, and then added quickly, "Why, you look unsightly. You should take off those jammies and just wear them nightly. What will your neighbors think?" "Look, my neighbors are nice, and they'll understand that showing my jammies is completely unplanned," I said to the postman, and then laid my hand across the breathing hole. "Furthermore," I told him, "you can take your advice and keep it somewhere until it turns nice. Now just go away and don't you think twice about my pajamas." "I'm a good mailman," he said, "and make no mistake, you should be grateful to me for the abuse that I take from a bad-tempered person or a dog or a snake." "Snake?" I said in surprise. "Yes, snake," he said sharply. "Yet I always stay calm, for a mild-tempered person can soothe like a balm." But I no longer listened, for something touched my palm through the breathing hole. I jerked back my hand, and I no longer felt bold. In fact, I felt fearful. In fact, I felt old, for whatever had touched me had been soft, wet, and cold. What sort of thing was it? "What's in that big box?" my wife called from the house. The mailman called to her. "Oh, don't ask your spouse. He's all gray and all shaky like a ruffed grouse. I'll just give him a hand." And then that dumb mailman, before I could gasp, leaned over the gate and with his big grasp felt all around the box, located a clasp, and took off the lid. "You're nuts!" I shouted to the mailman, and he looked confused. Then he looked down into the crate and suddenly was amused. "You're nuts!" I told him once again. "It's no wonder you get abused." The mailman quietly chuckled. "You shouldn't be impolite," he said. "Not with this type of pet. Especially with 3 of them, you'll need all the help you can get. Aren't you going to welcome them home, or haven't the 4 of you met?" Then he reached in the box. I knew there couldn't be snakes in the box, for the mailman showed no fright. And if there were 3 things in the box, they each would have to be light. Then the mailman pulled one out, and what an amazing sight! It was a coati-mundi. Never heard of a coati-mundi? Well, then let me explain. For a coati-mundi is an unusual beast with an unusual name. It's something like a long-faced raccoon and does well when it's tame. But it has one drawback. When the word curiosity was first defined, the dictionaryist had a coati-mundi in mind. For coatis must investigate anything they find, and very thoroughly. "Ta-ta," said the mailman, and continued on his route. As I watched the troublemaker leave, my hand was touched by a snout. I quickly glanced into the box and saw that they wanted out. They seemed harmless enough. "Okay, fellows, stretch your legs while I look at this crate," I said to the coati-mundis, who chattered like they couldn't wait to seize the opportunity to explore and investigate all of the things they saw. I lifted the coatis out of the box and put them on the ground. They sat and blinked for a little while and then started sniffing around. It took them a moment to find their way, but suddenly they found the door I hadn't shut. The coatis scampered up the steps and scurried through the door. I couldn't keep up with the little guys, but I followed their tracks on the floor. The tracks led up to my bedroom and then to my underwear drawer. My wife was quite upset. My wife got very angry and banged on the dresser's top. I don't know what you are, she said, but this has got to stop. Get out of those clothes at once, she said, or I shall call a cop. The coatis ignored her. Get out of those clothes at once, she said, or you'll be in trouble. No ringtail rascals will mess up my house and leave it looking like rubble. If you want your skins, you'll get out of there and get out on the double. Then she shook the dresser. She shook that dresser violently, and then we heard woofs and snorts, which we took for the sounds that coatis make when coatis are out of sorts. We waited a moment, and a coati appeared, all wrapped in my boxer shorts, and he was annoyed. The coati in my clothing put his paws on top of the drawer, looked at my wife, and then at me, and looked at her once more. He certainly knew she was angry, but he didn't know what for. He was just having fun. The coati slipped back into the drawer, and they all began to chatter. It was obvious that they were discussing a very serious matter, for after a moment they all climbed out, and with a little patter, the coatis left the room. I think the reason for the coatis leaving was that they had felt offended. In their opinion, the underwear drawer had looked much better upended. If we couldn't see that simple fact, then playtime would be suspended until we understood. The coatis became very dignified. In fact, their manners were starched. They stuck their noses up in the air and kept their long tails arched. They walked down the stairs and out the door, and off the porch they marched back to the wooden box. Without looking back, the coatis climbed in, and my wife had just shut the lid when a large panel truck came scooting up and stopped with a screeching skid. The driver jumped out and shouted to us.
Hey, do you know what I did?
We said, We think we know.
I'm terribly sorry,
the driver said.
But then what could I do? I was very tired and got your address confused with that of the zoo. I'll just put this crate back in the truck and leave the right package with you. You must have been surprised.
Well, I'll tell you, my wife told him. It could have been quite a chore if those little rogues had made a home out of my dresser drawer. Now take them back to where they belong, and I never want any more Coati Mondays in my undies. The end.